Okay, oops, excuse me. Sorry here while I'm getting ready. Just won't be a sec. Oh, there it is. Excuse me while I'm just setting up. So anyway, hello. I hope you're doing well, and we'll be doing our live stream film club of the film Tokyo Story, film by Yasujiro Ozu. So just give me 1 second to set up. Anyway, and then okay. If the sound is not good, please let me know in the comments or in the live stream, live chat. But hopefully it should be okay. I'm sorry. Just give me 1 second to set up. Sorry about this. Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry about this. This is very important. Okay. Just give me 1 second here while I set up. This is the thing about doing these things a little bit early, is that I tend to wake up. I tend to wake up rather late. Not late, but I wake up and I don't give myself time to set up properly. So I apologize for this late setup. I hope you can forgive me. Just one thing I wanted to just one thing I need to do. Just give me 1 second here while I just set this up. Pretty important, but just give me. All right. Okay. 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 Okay, so sorry about that. Sorry about the delay, but I think we can begin with Tokyo Stories. So, there's one more thing I have to do. So, greetings from Tokyo. I hope you're doing very well today. And there we go. Sorry about this. I've nudged the camera, so I apologize for that. So, what I would like to do today, my friends, is I would like to talk with you about a very special film from 1953. And this is the film Tokyo Story. And the film club live stream format, as you know, is one where we have a film that is decided upon in advance and just to give people time to watch the film. And it's very important, it's very important to be sure that we confirm that we will be talking about specifics of this film during the course of the next hour or so. And so I will be talking about specifics of the film as well. If you have not seen this film, Tokyo Story, then I would strongly suggest that you turn off this live stream, because I don't want to spoil this for you. It would be a shame to spoil a film of this power and magnitude for you. It's of course much more of an enriching experience for the first time, as it were. So I would strongly suggest you turn this off, watch the film, and then you can always come back. Now, this is a live stream, so it will be, of course, live, and those of us who are here live can take part in the, try to participate in the live chat as well. But this will also be uploaded after the live stream is over, so don't worry. So if you have not seen the film, you can just stop this live stream, or if you're watching it as a video, stop the video and then watch the film, and then you can come back at any time because it'll still be here. As for what I'm going to do, for those of you who are here for the first time, I will just go over certain points of the film and rely, I think, upon my viewing of the film as based on the presentation provided here by the Criterion Collection, Blu-ray. I have the dual format edition right here, but the Blu-ray is what I'll be relying on mostly. And also the commentary by David Desser, which is a feature on the Criterion release. So that's what I'll be relying on today. I am not going to go over, this is not meant to be an overview of the entirety of Ozu's work. I might make references to other Ozu works, but please don't worry, I won't be going into detail about other Ozu works. That's not the point of this live stream. This is about Tokyo Story, so I will be limiting my primary comments to this film, Tokyo Story. Of course, there are other films that can be discussed in relation to this film. I appreciate that point very fully, but it's one of the things about talking about other films, of course, is that we all don't have the same frame of reference, and so if I go into a rather detailed discussion about another film, that risks spoiling that film for those of us who haven't seen that film, etc. So I'm going to try to avoid that as much as possible. And also, I don't claim to be any expert on Ozu. I am not a scholar who has studied up on the specific aspects of Ozu's life and career. I'm not his biographer. I don't have any direct links to the production of this film. So I'm looking at this as an admirer of this work, and so just based on the amount of or the bits of information that I've been able to gather over the course of the time that I've been a fan and admirer of this film. So yeah, so I don't claim any sort of authority with respect to this, but it's just here to have I'm here to have a conversation with you. Finally, I should say, with respect to the live stream, live chat, there's of course a live chat going on, and this is open to all of you who are watching, and so please feel free to leave a comment. I know it can be a little bit daunting at first, but you don't have to be shy if you don't want. If you want to have just to make a quick comment, just to say hello to me or to anyone else, please feel free to do so. I will be addressing the live stream film chat, well, not live stream live chat comments to the best of my ability. So please feel free to leave comments, and I will be happy to respond. I'm sure many others who are here already will be very happy to respond, and we can go from there. One of the points of this, of course, among many things, one of the objectives of this is hopefully we might be able to meet other people here on YouTube who are interested in similar kinds of films, and so hopefully those opportunities will present themselves, if not here, then other times, but hopefully here. So there we go. If you have any questions or comments directed towards me, please feel free to leave them in the live stream, live chat anytime. Please note, however, that because this is a focus on Tokyo Story, I won't be able to talk about any non-Tokyo Story related topics. So I hope you can understand. I want to focus this time on Tokyo Story and Yasujiro Ozu's Tokyo Story. So if you have a question for me and it's not Tokyo Story related, or I don't think it's Tokyo Story related, then I'll just very politely, I'll just skip over it, and I don't want to refer to it necessarily. So if you want to still ask me that question, please feel free to leave it in a comment in a video here or elsewhere, and I will do my best to address it. So there we go. So, okay, so this is the film Tokyo Story, Yasujiro Ozu, and the film is released in 1953. The film is considered to be one of the greatest films ever made, and I think for good reason, which hopefully I'll try to get into over the course of this live stream film chat. I think for starters, what I'd like to maybe just throw out there as a kind of opening, if you will, would be the notion that, well, first of all, it's a story about an elderly couple, and they live in a place that's actually very far from Tokyo. And they come to Tokyo from their hometown of Onomichi. And Onomichi is actually in Hiroshima Prefecture, so it's very far. It's in southwest of Tokyo, now southwest of Japan, so it's actually very far. So they have to traverse quite a distance to get to Tokyo. And this couple who lives in this very small town that's very far away from Tokyo, they have, or they had, right, 4 children, 3 of which at the time, or at least as far as we know, they had 4 children, right? So 3 of which at the time the film begins and the film progresses through its story, 3 of which are alive. So, of those 3 living children, they are all, we understand, grown up. The youngest daughter, who we understand also is grown up, and based on sort of information that we get from the film universe itself, but also I think, as David Esser points out in his commentary, the youngest daughter is Kyoko, and she lives with the 2 of them, the parents, and she is a school teacher. And the 2 parents are Shukichi and Tomi. So Shukichi is the man, and Tomi is the woman. And these are played by Chishu and Chiyoko Higashiyama. So these are Shukichi and Tomi. So let's keep that in mind because, well, maybe I will be referring to them by name. So Shukichi is the man, the Chishu character. That's Shukichi pictured there. And Tomi is right here. So that's the wife, and Chiyoko Higashiyama. So these are the 2, this is the husband and wife and the mother and father of these children. And they are living with their youngest, now grown up daughter. And the whole idea of the story of the film, of course, is that they will be going to Tokyo and also to Osaka, actually, but primarily to Tokyo, or to the central part of Japan, let's put it that way, to visit, let's see, 2, 3, 1, 2. Sorry, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. That's 5 children. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I said 4 children as well. It's 5 children, and 4 of them are living and 1 is deceased. So this is very important. So they will be going to Tokyo to visit their eldest son, who is at the time of the film, he's a doctor, and he has a family. He has a wife and he has 2 sons. And this is, I have to keep this straight myself, this is Koichi. And so he is the eldest son, so he lives in Tokyo as a doctor. And then the other child who lives in Tokyo is Shige, and this is the eldest daughter, and she is married, and she has a beauty salon? Was it Olala Beauty Salon? And she is played by Haruko Sugimura, and so she is also living in Tokyo. So these are the two grown-up children that are living in Tokyo. Then there is the youngest son, who is also grown up. He is Keizo, but he doesn't live in Tokyo, right? He lives in Osaka, and we won't necessarily see any direct visiting, if you will, of the parents to Osaka necessarily. The story is primarily about Tokyo, and also a little bit outside of Tokyo, but primarily about the parents' visits to the eldest son and the eldest daughter, now grown up, who are both living in Tokyo with their separate families. But there's the youngest son as well, who is Keizo. And then there's Kyoko, who is the youngest daughter, who, as I referred to, is living with them in the small town of Onomichi in the southwest of Japan, in Hiroshima Prefecture. So again, I said 4, but I meant to say 5, so please pardon me for my mistake there. Then there's also the second son, who died in the war. And this is very significant, right? Because that second son's wife is named Noriko. And so Noriko is also living in Tokyo, but Noriko is not their blood relative necessarily. In other words, she's not a direct daughter, but she is the daughter-in-law. And so we have, of the 5 children who are actually blood relatives, 4 are living, and 2 are living in Tokyo. And the deceased son has a widow who is also living in Tokyo. So we have essentially 3 focal points of visiting in Tokyo that the couple Shikichi and Tomi go and visit, or they meet. And also the youngest son is also a part of the story, but he is a little bit in the periphery, as well as the younger daughter, who is seen with the 2 of them at the very start of the film as they're making their preparations to go to the city. But they are kind of on the periphery, although they do serve a very important, I think, they do come in at a very key point later on in the film, almost at the tail end of the film as well, which is also a very key sequence. But that's the essential setup. I think what we have going on here, therefore, is a film that is, it's a film that's not about, well, actually, let me get to that. I mean, about the significance of Tokyo. Let me just stick with the general setup of the characters first. But and then we see the elderly couple visit these various focal points, these foci, if you will, in Tokyo. We also see the elderly couple go to, for certain reasons, of course, go to the seaside hot spring resort. It's Atami. And so that is actually outside of Tokyo. That's in Shizuoka. And so we are taken outside of Tokyo. In fact, the cover art here on the Criterion dual format, and also the recent Criterion release, this is actually of them sitting along the shore on the next day after they've spent a night in Atami, a very noisy evening, as we can tell, because it's been too noisy because of the neighboring crowds, and they're young and they're playing mahjong. So it's been difficult for this elderly couple to get their sleep. And in fact, Shukichi showed quite visible frustration on his face the night before, as he was fanning himself trying to get to sleep, but not being able to do so. And actually, this is a very significant scene because, as you recall, after they decide to go back to Tokyo, they stand up and Shukichi starts to walk away, but Tomi is visibly quite weakened for whatever reason. He has a very difficult time getting up. And in fact, this is the first time where we see, as viewers anyway, Shukichi, the man, visibly shaken and almost worried because he doesn't quite know exactly why she is expressing this kind of a spell of exhaustion, if you will. Well, of course, we will realize later on as the film develops that this is probably an indication of the illness that has already befallen, and which is very much likely the reason why Tomi ends up falling ill, and unfortunately the reason why she ends up passing away around the latter half of the film, as we know. So this is actually a very significant moment, I think, in many respects, because not only do we see that very visibly, there have been hints about it early in the film, I think, but we see it visibly, but also Shukichi sees it visibly as well. So their moment at Atami is very significant. So my point earlier is that this is actually a very significant picture. And I understand actually that this picture, as well as this is actually of Atami, this is of Onomichi, which is not Tokyo. And actually this picture is also, I believe, is the scene where Noriko and Shukichi are standing by the little shrine there at the end upon Tomi's passing, and they're looking out towards the skyline. So this is also in Onomichi. So we have Onomichi, Onomichi, Atami. Nowhere on this cover art do we see any picture of Tokyo, very interestingly enough. So, despite the fact that the film is called Tokyo Story. Because actually, I think Tokyo is, while we see glimpses of Tokyo, very significant glimpses of Tokyo in the film, and while of course we do spend, I would say, a significant portion of the film's running time in Tokyo, I don't know, and there is actually a sequence of a bit of sightseeing in Tokyo where Noriko is taking the elderly couple around on sightseeing, kind of a sightseeing bus. This is after Shige, the eldest daughter. Shige is kind of basically pushes them off towards Noriko and doesn't want to oh no, this is after the point where they've been pushed off by both the eldest son and also Shige because of certain reasons. The elderly son, the doctor, has a sudden visit from a patient who needs help, and so that spoils their plans, and also Shige is unable or unwilling to assist them, and so it's up to the always reliable Noriko, is it not, to help them out, and so that's part of their excursion, I think, and also it's also a means of us and them getting the opportunity to better get acquainted with Noriko and her situation. But my point is that this film is, while it's set significantly in Tokyo, it's not set primarily in Tokyo. And many of the, or a certain number of the significant events of the film actually happen outside of Tokyo. As I said before, there is also a son who is in Osaka, and there are very, very brief aspects of the film with respect to Osaka, of course, but so in many respects, perhaps it should be a film that is called Tokyo and Osaka Story, perhaps. But my point is that Tokyo, I think, serves not just as a setting, of course, but I think it serves as a larger metaphor. It's an idea or the notion of Tokyo that's, I think, very significant. This is brought up very poignantly in the exchange between the two of them, Shukichi and Tomi, right after they remember there's that scene where they're sitting right by Ueno Park, and it's that kind of gate in Ueno Park, and they stand up and they go towards the view, and Tomi has a little bit of a forgetfulness there. Well, she forgets her umbrella, I think, and Shukichi sort of almost almost gets angry at her, berates her, so don't forget the umbrella. So that's also a significant point. I'll get to that later, hopefully. But they go admire the view, and I think it's Tomi, the wife, who says, it's so, Tokyo is so, I'm paraphrasing, but Tokyo is so large. I think if we were to get lost, I don't think we'd be able to find each other again. And I think that's a very poignant moment, and it's a really poetic way of expressing the metaphor of Tokyo. Here is a place where the two of them have the potential of getting lost. Of course, they come from a smaller place separate from Tokyo, so it's almost a different world, actually. There's almost a close intimacy that's suggested in their place, Onomichi, which is perhaps a little bit contrasted by their time in Tokyo, of course. But I think that's a really poignant moment, because it's suggestive of not only the size of Tokyo, but also the emotional impact of Tokyo, if you will, and also the fears also that this couple has. If they come here, they can end up losing each other. And in fact, we can even say that, rather not. I don't want to necessarily go into a specific sort of blame game, if you will, but in fact, it could be said on a very general basis that not knowing more about the nature of Tomi's illness, it could be said that perhaps the fact that they had to travel a lot, and the fact that they had to go not only to Tokyo and to Osaka, but also to Atami as well, and back to Tokyo, and then Osaka, and then Hiroshima, and also all this traveling. And in fact, Tomi is the one. She falls ill, actually off screen. We never see it directly, but she falls ill. We understand she fell ill on the train ride. So. It could have been the fact that they were so busy and moving around that had something to do with the fact that she fell ill. So in that respect, it could be seen, at least on a very maybe metaphorical level, at least, that it was her trip here to Tokyo that seemed to cause a decline in her physical state. And so perhaps, yes, indeed, maybe she was right that, if they came to Tokyo, they might have the potential of losing each other. And unfortunately, they did, because of what happens to her at the end, which is a very unfortunate and sad moment, of course. So that is a general overview of what the character background is, but there is so much more that I want to talk about here. But before I do, let me just address some of the comments here in the chat, and then we can go from there. So let's see. I see Isaac is here. Hello, Isaac. Jared is here as well. Paula, it's nice to see you as well. Cine Arts as well. Great. And Wolfgratz, hello. J-Man XYZ2. Dihui 1996, hello from greetings from Toronto. Hello, Toronto is a lovely place. And Cooper Clever 1972 is here. JR62 is here. Gary Robinson, great. Let's see. Jared Wignall says, I'm still trying to process the film since watching it this week. It was very good. Yes, yes. And Stephen Cruz, hello. Jared says, I'll say I was a bit surprised by the ending of the film. I didn't see the ending coming. By the ending, are you referring to is it the death? Are you referring to the death and what happens, and the aftermath of that, and the children gather and the funeral, or let's see. JR62 says, this was a very gentle drama, very enjoyable. No flaws or complaints here. Great for a Sunday afternoon. Yes, it's a great comment. Carl's Rants and Reviews, hello. Wolfgratz, not quite as sad as Make Way for Tomorrow, but it's a near-run thing. I find it very melancholy, although, of course, part of its theme is that life does go on. Yes, life does go on. The pathos of life in David Esser, I think, makes the poignant reference to this Japanese sort of notion in Japanese literature and arts, which is, and also therefore by extension, sort of society, which is mono no aware, which is this idea of sort of a transcendental beauty or pathos, if you will. So I think there is a lot there as well, the kind of maybe the gracefulness, if you will, having grace in times of tragedy and sadness. And the idea of expressing that or showing that would be, even in the face of ultimate sadness, relying on the notion that, yes, life does indeed go on. Let's see. Paula says, the ending with the watch was so moving. This is actually my first Ozu. Well, gosh. Wow, that's really great. So to have Tokyo Story as being one's first Ozu film, I think that is lovely. That is a cause for celebration, I think. It's a really wonderful one to say. And Dihui says the same thing. 1996 said, this was also my first Ozu. Well done. Oh, gosh, that makes me so happy. Let's see. Oh, Siklau Brunn, greetings from Copenhagen. This is my favorite movie of all time, so we'll stick around. Wonderful, thank you. Thank you very much. Wolfgrat says, I watched everything I could in just over a week after I came out of a stay in a hospital. I watched in chronological order. Oh, you're talking about the works of Ozu. Yes. Yes, and Gary Robinson says also, it's a masterpiece and nearly my favorite Ozu. Wow, interesting. I wonder what your favorite is. And Jared says, I saw many actors and actresses in this film were in Good Morning. Yes, sort of reoccurring collaborators of Ozu, like other filmmakers have the same actors and actresses in their films. Yes, that's correct. Yes, you see a number of actors and actresses who do reappear. It's sort of a troupe, if you will. And also the same is true for many of the people behind the scenes, behind the camera as well. So Ozu's universe is a very interesting and fun one to traverse and to explore. So let's see. Just skipping over here. Okay, Heirloom Providence, hello. First time in a long time watching this film today. It's been too long. Theodore, hello. It's nice to see you. Let's see. Richard Waterman, hello from Portland. Thank you for your recommendations and discussions. Thank you, Richard. Maybe if I might be mistaken. If I am, I apologize. But maybe I think this is the first time that you and I are speaking. If so, it's nice to meet you. Greetings. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Richard. My name is Daisuke, so nice to meet you. And let's see. Just skipping over here. Cooper Glover, 1972. Hiroshima is like 4 hours by train to Tokyo, right? Yes. Now it's about. I mean, I haven't been to. I've never been to Hiroshima, actually, to be perfectly honest. So I don't have the direct experience. But yes, it's about 4 hours now. So I don't actually know what the time would be. It's something that I should research. What it would have been. In 1952, 1953, because the film is a modern day film, so well, we can assume I can probably say that would it be the same amount of time as now? I probably would hazard a guess that it wouldn't. It would be longer than now, but I don't think it would be overly long. It wouldn't involve. I mean, they weren't slow trains back then, but it's worth checking out. But let's say, for our argument's sake, that it would be at least 4 hours. Yes, maybe more. So it is a long time. Let's see. Dihui says 1996. I thought the family had 5. Yes, that's right. I made the initial error at first, but then I corrected myself halfway through. So thank you for the correction. And let's see. Wolfgrat says Kyoko seems to be the afterthought child. Yes, actually, no. The afterthought child for me, actually, when I first made my my initial comment that there were 4 children instead of 5 children. I think the afterthought that I made by pure accident was, but it was my own error. What I did was I didn't realize the youngest son, the youngest living son, who is in Osaka, and he's the one who is the one that we actually, I would say, get to know the least of the currently living children. I mean, we know a little bit about the youngest daughter because we see her at first, and of course, psychologically speaking, the first characters that we see on screen are usually ones that we gravitate toward. And so I remember her, and of course the eldest son, who is a doctor, he has a kind of prominent role. The eldest daughter, Shige, has a very, very prominent role. She's almost villainous, although I would actually politely suggest that she's not necessarily a black and white villain, if you will. I think she's much more of a deeply complicated and nuanced character, which makes her very fascinating. And then, of course, there's Noriko, who is the daughter-in-law, of course. So I think what I was doing when I mentioned 4 instead of 5 in my mind was I just very innocently overlooked the youngest son, whom we get to know the least because we spend the least amount of time. Although he makes a very, we see a little bit of him making reference to the parents coming to visit him, right? We see a little bit of him in Osaka. So there's a kind of a short scene of him in Osaka, a little bit. And then we see him quite prominently, unfortunately, at the end when he comes to Onomichi, unfortunately, after his mother has passed. And he says, oh gosh, I couldn't make it on time. And there was this look of real, I mean, I can say I could probably interpret his look on his face to be genuine sadness, and he right at the kind of funeral part. He says he's at the ceremony, but then he leaves and he just goes outside because he says he can't bear it, and so there is a certain suggestion perhaps that something is maybe emotionally or spiritually anyway eating away at him. Could it be guilt? I don't know. I think we all want to think that perhaps he feels a little bit guilty, at least I do, because there is this sense that maybe he has failed in his duty in terms of a kind of fetal piety, if you will, or this idea of children being devoted to their parents. I mean, one of the acts that is kind of unspoken, although Shige, in her great way, does she not, makes it spoken, which is the fact that he didn't make it on time, and he was the only child who didn't make it on time prior to Tomi's passing. So despite the fact that he lives the closest out of them, which is actually not quite true, right? I think Kyoko lives the closest by virtue of the fact that she lives with them, but that's a minor point. But the my point is, I think that we get to know him the least, Keizo. And it's interesting too, we get to know him the least, and he's the youngest living son, but his reaction at the funeral is very interesting. Now, I don't know how you feel about that. I feel it's genuine, but it's also interesting too because the fact that he is not seen again, right, is suggested to the fact that he left rather early. We can assume he probably left around or at the same time as Koichi and Shige, the eldest son and the eldest daughter, and of course Noriko stayed behind for some amount of time after everyone left. So I guess and actually that's a really interesting point too, which I should bring up in the context of the youngest son while I'm there, which is the idea that not only is this film very much a film that is maybe a metaphorical journey, if you will. I mean, we do get glimpses of Tokyo, but not really. Not all the children live in Tokyo, of course, but there is also this, this interesting filmmaking technique that we see, which is we get certain glimpses of information at first, as viewers, but we get these scenes of information in lieu of others. In other words, we don't get all of the key pieces of information directly. For example, what do I mean by this? For example, we never get the reunion, the actual reunion scene of the parents meeting the eldest son, and I can also assume the eldest daughter, because those are the people that come out of the car when they arrive at the eldest son's house, remember? But we never see the reunion for the first time. We never see them meeting up, which we can assume maybe would have happened at the station. We never see that directly. That's off screen. We never see the time that Tomi falls seriously ill, which causes her, therefore, to right, essentially she falls ill and then she unfortunately dies soon after. We do see glimpses of something that indicates frailness and weakness and exhaustion perhaps, and I think the events that unfold later will suggest that these are probably signs of her illness. But we never see the moment when she actually collapses, right? We hear it off screen or after the fact, and then we get the exchange of the telephone calls back and forth between the children and in particular Koichi and Shige, and then the daughter-in-law Noriko, and their various reactions to the information in the news. And in fact, that's the scene where we get that wonderful lovely close-up shot of Noriko after we see those number of cuts in her office with the huge, was it Bridgestone tire in the foreground there in one instance, right? And then we get the cut of the call going to Noriko while she's working at her office, and then after she gets the news, we go to her sitting at her desk looking very despondent. And so I think of the exchanges that we saw, it is she who seems, at least to us anyway, to be expressing the most sadness, because I think deep down she realizes what this signifies. And I think David Esser makes a really excellent point of this in the commentary at this particular moment. But I guess my point is that we don't get all the pieces of information. And in fact, this is also true in the building of the characters. Let's focus on the character of Shukichi, for instance. I think he is a character that we see him at first, and let's take Tomi as well as an example. We see them, and we of course, we don't know who they are when the film opens. We basically open with shots of Onomichi, and then we see the two of them sitting down, essentially we understand getting ready for their trip to Tokyo, which they're supposed to be embarking that day, I think. And but we don't get any background necessarily about who they are. We never get any story about them, but we do get information about them maybe indirectly. And I think that information then serves perhaps as possible basis or bases for allowing us to understand perhaps maybe some reasons that could exist as to why the relationship, especially the relationship between the children and the parents, and in particular the relationship between the parents and Shige, the daughter, might be as sort of frosty as it is. But for example, remember there's the scene where the parents arrive in Tokyo, and there's the shot of the scene where the mother, they're talking, and she and they're exchanging sort of pleasantries, and then she is explaining to is it Noriko, right? And to us also as the viewer that you're kind of getting a little bit overweight or something like that. And I'm paraphrasing, and it reminds you of the time when long ago when they were at school, and the mother was there visiting, and she was sitting on a chair, and the chair sort of collapsed, I think, and it caused, I think, quite a great deal of embarrassment to Shige. And I think David Esser makes a point of this in the commentary. He sort of laughs it off a little bit, but this point is a sort of indirect marker, if you will. I think at least two significant things. It first shows the fact that Shige focuses on the weight, the appearance of Tomi, and she seems to be using that as an excuse, if you will, for first of all, not necessarily thinking that the mother was ill. Because I think in Shige's mind, perhaps this idea of being overweight might suggest that maybe the mother has a healthy appetite and she's enjoying herself, she's happy, and so it doesn't necessarily trigger in her mind that perhaps Tomi might not be as strong as she might otherwise look physically, and also that also leads to that moment later on in the film. Remember when Shige's husband comes to the salon, which is also their house. And he comes visiting, he comes with cakes that he bought, and he's going to give them to the parents who are, I think, staying upstairs at the time because the salon is on the first floor. But then Shige says, "Oh, no, they don't need this." And then she does that really, oh gosh, it's such a villainous thing. She's not a villain. I really believe she's not a villain, but I'm just saying it just for lack of a better phrase. But she does that really, that villainous thing. I think that's a moment where she lost me, which is where, right, she and the husband later, they decide she doesn't want to give the cakes to them, but rather she eats them herself. But the husband later on has a showing of goodness, perhaps, right? He does take what we understand to be one of the cakes, right? And David Esser, I think, makes a point to say this is actually one of the cakes that he brought, and he gives one to Tomi, who is upstairs. So that was nice of him, I suppose. But I think going back to that earlier moment when Shige is talking with the mother at the time that she arrives at Tokyo for the first time, right? So I think that moment is significant because it shows not only Shige's mindset with respect to her mother. It shows her mindset with respect to her mother in two aspects. One, she thinks she is healthy, but also it also suggests that she sees her mother perhaps in a little bit of a resentful way because of maybe as an example being this sort of embarrassing episode that occurred when Shige was younger. I don't think we can make much out of that because I don't think it comes up later on in the film. I think David Esser also expresses caution, and I don't want to suggest that this forms the psychological basis for the entirety of the tension of the film. No, don't get me wrong, but I do want to say that it could be, instead of it being the key moment in their history that caused the rift to begin, I would say that if it's to serve as anything, if at all, I mean, maybe you think it doesn't serve as anything at all, but perhaps Shige as a character, that's just who she is. And I think that her character can be interpreted that way as well. But another way to look at it as a possibility is that maybe that moment when she was a child and there was that embarrassing moment at school could have served as maybe one instance in a long line of the kind of the slow process, if you will, of little annoyances that Shige feels towards her mother, the kind of drip, drip, drip of annoyances that have accumulated over time that would suggest the relationship that or the feelings that she has towards her mother. I don't think it's anything on purpose as well, because I think also there's a lot to be said about Shige as a character and just the kind of person that she is, because she seems to be she seems to have a certain way about herself, not just towards her parents, although very intensely so, but also towards other people in her life, her husband and also her brother, etc. So and also Noriko. She has this really interesting way of being able to turn on and off her emotions in a way that I think from an outsider perspective can seem rather off-putting and quite insensitive. But I would suggest that she isn't trying to be in any way villainous. My sense is that it's just her nature as a character. But maybe in conjunction with her natural state as a character, I think there might also be some suggestion about certain instances that have occurred over the course of her life, which might be furtherance, perhaps, of some kinds of feelings that she then now currently has vis-a-vis her parents. And this is also true with her relationship with the father as well, Shuichi, right? Because there's that moment where Shukichi comes home, or not, he doesn't even come home. He's escorted by, I think, a policeman late at night. This is after the Shukichi meets up with his old friends. What is it? Hattori and Numata, and what is it? He goes out with them and he reminisces, and they get very drunk, and then there's a discussion about the weakness of the younger generation, and the ingratitude of the younger generation, and disappointment in the younger generation. And then he comes back, Shukichi does, and he's very, very drunk, and he's almost collapsing with drunkenness. After having imbibed a lot of alcohol, we assume. But the idea here is that we see the anger and the frustration on Shige's face when he comes home to their house, and she expresses that moment where he's drinking again, which shows that perhaps there was something that was to do with Shiki's drinking. Perhaps there was something there with drinking. I'm not suggesting that he's an alcoholic, because it's made clear, I think, that he hasn't been drinking for a long time, but in fact he comes to Tokyo, and that's when I guess he indulges himself, because I think he considers that he's on vacation, perhaps, or he's on a trip. And in fact, the first time he drinks is not when he's visiting his old acquaintances, right? But the first time he drinks is actually prior to that. So Shige doesn't see it. He has a drink when he is with Noriko at Noriko's very small apartment, right? So that's the first time, and he makes a big moment of that, actually. Maybe maybe I'll just have one, or something to that effect. And so I think the suggestion there is that perhaps Shukichi as a character, when he's drunk, he doesn't necessarily show off signs, let's say, of being overly, I don't know, violent or anything like that. So I'm not saying anything about him being an abusive father or anything like that. But what it's like, perhaps. I don't know what kind of familiarity you have with, let's say, drinking culture. But Japanese drinking culture, I think, is very interesting, because. And the way it's depicted in this film, I think, is spot on. At least my understanding of the Japanese drinking culture is because, we have a character like these men, Shukichi and his old acquaintances, and they have a little bit of a way of speaking. When he first sees Hattori and his wife in Tokyo, right, and Hattori's talking about I think it's the lodger who lives upstairs, who's a law student. He should be studying, but he just plays mahjong and pachinko or something. So he's speaking, and they're kneeling, and they've got this, and the wife is there with the fan, and there's showing of pleasantries and politeness, and it's not fake. That's actually, I think, a real genuine show, but there is a certain way in which certain formalities have to be. Well, are not have to be, but they tend to be observed when you have these daily exchanges. Well, when alcohol enters the picture, people tend to lower their guard, and that then leads to, they go to the first restaurant and they have their meal, and then they have alcohol there, and then from there they go to another bar, and perhaps another bar. I don't know how many bars they went to. I think we see one bar after the initial restaurant, but I'm not sure. We might be able to assume more than one bar. I'm not sure, but we see one bar. So we can say at least one bar. But in any event, by the time we see them at that second place, they are already well taken by drink. So, and then their guard is way, way down. And now this is a time when they get to express all it is we can assume that they feel deep down. And the way it works also is that, when you have in Japanese drinking culture, when you have, let's say, a number of people drink, usually you have one person express some kind of angst that he or she feels deep down, and then you have the other person tends to say, yes, you're right, yes, I agree with you. And I think Shukichi in a way serves that function. But then as the discussion progresses, right, we have the idea of Shukichi also talking about his own disappointment and and dissatisfaction, and we understand this that he's probably referring to his children, which he expressed, of course, a little bit earlier in the film because this is after I think they come back from Atami. And remember that at Atami, he had that discussion with his wife Tomi about how, sort of expressing disappointment. That's not even under the effect of drink when he was at Atami, right? But he's sort of expressing disappointment with his elder son, Desser. David Desser makes the point that perhaps he, at this point, is realizing that his son is not necessarily as successful as he would like. And of course, there's disappointment expressed with Shige in the sense that maybe she's not as nice as we remember her, or maybe was she always this unpleasant, or something to that effect. But so therefore, I think we can understand the point where we see Shukichi really, really drunk at the bar. Some scenes later is an indication that perhaps what he's saying at the bar is his real feelings, because we saw him express similar feelings earlier when he wasn't drunk. So, but my point is that this depiction of Tokyo or Japanese drinking culture, I think, is really spot on. And it's this idea of when we get drunk, we then say what it is we really think. We might have been able to say it in cloaked niceties and pleasantries while not being drunk, but then when we are drunk, what's the phrase? The gloves are off, as it were. And yes, that forms the ultimate expression, I think, of frustration, which is right. Which is, I think, very poetic and fitting, because it's this idea of drinking that serves, I think, many facets to help us understand Shukichi's character. One, because of the influence of drink, he then expresses this frustration. Right? And then two, which is what I was trying to allude to earlier, which is the fact that he is drinking is suggested of something to do with him in the past. And while it's not clear, there's a suggestion that perhaps he might have had some trouble, or maybe there was some issue, or maybe it was something, maybe it was his health, we don't know, but something with drink. And I think if we were to take Shige at her word, maybe according to her, he was unpleasant, or he became unpleasant from her point of view whenever he got drunk. So there is something to work with there, I think, in order to enable us, perhaps, maybe, possibly, to try to expand upon Shukichi's character as we think about it. And in fact, also, before I get to the comments, I do want to mention one of the key point about Shukichi's character. One other point about Shukichi's character, the Chichiryu character, that I think is very important. David Desser I don't think makes mention of this, but another thing that's suggestive when we're talking about indirect ways in which we are learning about the story and the character, right? I've spoken a little bit about we see certain things that are, we hear about certain things that are off screen. We get little nuggets of character, but we don't get that directly. We have to, inferences, and we have to assemble the information as best as we can in our minds going forward as we make our way through the film. Okay, and we see this not only with narrative or plot points, but we also see it with characters as well. And then with Shukichi, I think this is really, really important because one of the things about this film that I don't necessarily see discussed much, and I'd love to hear your opinions on, is the film, of course, is focused on this idea of, let's say, the younger generation as expressed as symbolized by the elder son, the elder daughter, and also Noriko. There seems to be this idea of, at least with the blood relatives, a lack of appreciation for one's elders, perhaps a breakdown of Confucian ideals, if you will. This idea, and perhaps that's rooted in this notion of a Japanese post-war economy as well, because one of the reasons why the children seem to be not having as much time for their parents as the parents would like would be, at least for the Koichi's, the doctor, he has a practice, but the assumption being it's not as successful. And David Esser makes this point: just because he's a doctor doesn't necessarily mean that he is a fully successful one. And this is indicated by the fact that usually people in maybe upper middle class and above, who are maybe in the medical profession, might have a servant, a house servant, like a maid, but there is no such servant, which means therefore that, and also the fact that he is very willing to take on a patient during his day off, might also be suggestive of the fact that he is really much, he's not in a high level of success as one might necessarily assume for someone in the medical profession. Okay, and then for Shige, this is the idea she's also working. Her salon is also out of her house, and she is seen to be working along with her other people who are working there as well. And she makes these excuses, but I think they're not illegitimate, right? About how the reason why she wanted them, the parents, off to Atami is because there's an assembly of, association of hairdressers, I think, at her house or something, or other things like that. And she's also expressing busyness. And it's not like she isn't busy, but we do see, because we do see her at work. So I think for those two instances, and also we see Noriko, and we see that she is also a working woman as well, and we see the state of her apartment, and I think it doesn't, I don't think we can ignore the fact that her apartment is quite small and her living conditions are such that she is not so well off necessarily, which therefore makes that moment where she gives a little bit of spending money to Tomi, just between the two of them, that makes that moment oh so significant, because the assumption is that she probably, Noriko is not a wealthy woman, and despite that, she's able to give a little bit something, where Shige wasn't willing to give up a little bit of cake. Here we have Noriko being able to give a little bit of spending money to Tomi, which is such a beautiful moment, of course. But my point about this is that we have children who seem to be confronted with certain realities, economic realities of the time, and I think we can make the assumption that there are certain maybe harsh economic realities at this time, although it's not, no one's in dire straits necessarily. It's still not the most ideal situation, which is cause for this rift between one generation and the other generation, both sides expressing some kind of frustration. Of course, the parents, of course, expressing frustration, at least with the son and the daughter, anyway, in terms of their disappointment. Yes, so there is this idea here of a kind of right, maybe something to do with the economic hardships that we have after World War II, at the end of the war, right? Because this is 1953, so this is maybe several years after the war's end. Not completely far, of course, and in fact, the war element is still there because of the fact that the son, Noriko's husband, and their son passed away, and so. that is still lingering out there. But what was I saying before? I think, what was I saying? What was I saying? I just suddenly lost my train of thought. Excuse me for 1 second. This sometimes happens in live streams. What was I saying? What was I saying? Oh, yes, so this is talking about Shukichi's character. Okay, right. So on the one hand, we have these elements of that are information that are given to us directly about Shukichi, about the characters and about their feelings towards one another, and about this idea about this film being about the rift between the older generation and the younger generation, and perhaps the idea that the younger generation is expressing maybe or not showing gratitude towards the older generation, as exemplified by Tomi and Shukichi. Okay, so in that kind of dynamic, I think it's very easy for me, and I think we're meant to see that the elder generation characters are maybe in a more sympathetic position, or to put it another way, I think it's easier for me to sympathize with the elderly characters than it is for me to necessarily sympathize with the younger characters. Okay, which is, I think, the approach that many people have towards this film, and but I would suggest that there might be a slightly different or an equally appropriate approach that one can have at the same time with respect to the elderly generation, and in particular with respect to Shukichi, in terms of shifting allegiances and sympathies. If we notice, there are a number of moments where we see Shukichi expressing, well, they're not necessarily overt acts or moments of anger towards Tomi, but he does show a certain sense of maybe ingratitude towards Tomi, or maybe verging on anger or frustration towards Tomi, his wife. And this comes up in at least two moments, as I'll give these two as examples. So the first is the one that I alluded to a little bit earlier, right, which is around the middle of the film, and they are the two of them. They've just come back from Atami, and they've come back early because they don't find it to be, they don't want to stay there much longer. And then, right, they go back to Shige's house, and Shige expresses a little bit disappointed. She wanted them to stay away a little bit longer. And then, so then they leave the house, and then we see the shot of them in front of, what is it, Ueno Park, and that gate, and they see the two of them sitting there, and then they go off and they go admire the view of Tokyo, and that's where Tomi has her speech about, if they got lost, they would never be able to find each other. That moment, right? He gets up first, and then she follows, and then he gets a little bit frustrated with her because he's, don't forget the umbrella or something. It's the umbrella, right? Please correct me if I'm wrong, but right. So he expresses a little bit of frustration with her at that moment. He also expresses frustration with her at the very start of the film when you first see her, right? When you see them, and they say goodbye to the youngest daughter, and then she's off to school, and then there's a greeting from the neighbor, and then that's the exchange where they explain what they're doing today. Oh, it's going to be they talk about the weather, and then the neighbor leaves, and then we get back to the two of them, Tomi and Shukichi, and then Tomi's packing, and she says, where's my kind of cushion or something? Where's my little thing? And we see a moment where Shukichi actually expresses frustration. I gave it to you or something, and he's a little bit angry with her. And she said, I can't find it. I can't. I gave it, and you must have lost it or something. And I said, I can't find it. And then a little bit of time passes, and Shukichi says, oh, here it is, and just gives it to her. And then there's no sorry, there's no anything after, but it's just, it's a kind of a throwaway moment. But I think I always look at those moments as being this idea that, Shukichi is not necessarily the most sympathetic character. I think the most sympathetic character is perhaps Tomi. Tomi as the wife, right? Because she seems perhaps to be, maybe she's always tries to put on a pleasant air about her, but maybe she tends to be at least maybe the butt of not jokes, but of frustrations, of the focus of frustration, certainly by Shige, perhaps a little bit by the eldest son, but also by Shukichi, I would argue, and this probably goes towards Shukichi as being a character that perhaps didn't treat his wife as well as he could have, right? And I'm not suggesting that he was violent or anything, no, nothing of that extreme nature, but what I'm suggesting is that maybe he didn't express as much gratitude towards her as one would like. And in fact, I would argue that perhaps his lack of gratitude towards her, while it doesn't reach the same levels as the elder son and their children, of course, because he does, of course, still show much of appreciation and love towards her. But there are those moments where he does have flashes, let's say, of ingratitude. Let's put it that way. So it's, I think, of a lesser degree, but it's still there, I would argue. That makes his relationship with Tomi, I think, also very interesting, right? Because therefore, then not only do we have shifting allegiance, or not only do we have a certain way of sympathizing between one generation and the next, but within the same elder generation, we have a certain way of sympathizing or placing our sympathies, and which therefore then makes Shukichi's reaction at the end of the film, after Tomi has passed away, I think all the more poignant. Right? Because we see, of course, that moment where he is really, that close-up of his face, and his chin is almost trembling when they are all surrounding her, Tomi, once she's in her bed, and we realize that she is going to die. And it's at night, and we see that heartbreaking close-up of Chichiryu's face. And then, of course, after she passes away, and we see his reaction, and there's a certain, I don't know if serenity is the right word, but there's a certain kind of calmness in his demeanor. That's when he says goodbye to Noriko, and then we see him back in Onomichi, his hometown, and the first scene repeats itself in a really haunting and poetic closing. It matches the beginning, right, where we have the reemergence of the neighbor, and then they exchange pleasantries, and then she goes and then leaves him alone. And then during that exchange, right, he says, I really, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, he has that smile, and it's part of the pleasantries. And I think I really should have, I should have treated her better or something. And then I think that's a very key moment, because it expresses a kind of pleasantry, but in fact, I think it holds much more meaning, because if we think back to those moments when he sort of bit back at her, or he was a little bit showing flashes of ingratitude, I think those are the moments where we can think that perhaps he might be feeling some kind of regret. He says it in pleasant. Oh man, it's that old adage. We don't know what we've missed until it's gone. And when we think about it, we should have treated these people better when they were around, right? And I think that's the expression, or what's being expressed at that moment, actually, when we think about Shukichi's character. So therefore, I think with these bits of information that are provided to us indirectly with respect to Shukichi's character, I think we can, at least I can, begin to paint a picture of Shukichi that becomes much more nuanced and complex. And we see flaws, certain flaws that might possibly emerge, depending on one's interpretation, but that might possibly emerge with respect to Shukichi. Are they sort of fatal character flaws? No, I don't think so. Rather than maybe flaw is perhaps an inappropriate way of terming it. Perhaps what might be a better way of looking at it is that it's this idea of he is only human, which thus makes the film, I think for me, much more powerful, because he becomes much more of a human character. Because if he were a character that was just 100% wholly sympathetic and he becomes completely likable, then I think the film, while it would still be powerful, I think it loses something over the course of time. But now that we think about it, it becomes much more of an amazing piece in my mind, because we are dealing with not wholly sympathetic characters, but we are dealing with characters that are painted with a brush that makes them human. So I find that a facet of Shukichi's character, and the sort shades of nuance that give him depth because of flaws that they seem to suggest. I find that to be utterly fascinating. And I think the same holds true for Shige as well. But I've been talking too much, so let me just now stop talking and just go to the chat, and we will go from there. So let's see. So Sina Arts says, Tokyo Story is my favorite Ozu film. It is absolutely a magnum opus for me. Ozu was truly a wonderful filmmaker, and many of his films are life-changing to me. The Noriko trilogy is perfect in my opinion. Max, hello. Let's see. And Cooper Glover 1972 says, Shige seems selfish. Yes. I think so too, although I should mention this before I forget. I think she is probably selfish. I don't think she means to be villainous. She just has this way about her, like when at the end after Tomi is sick, and she's like, oh man. She's expressing true sadness, and she's showing a lot of regret, not regret, but she's showing a lot of sadness and the tragedy of the situation. And then she's suddenly able to turn off and talk about practicalities, about, did you bring your mourning clothes or something like that. And these sorts of things, her ability to turn on and off, and her ability to be able to speak about one thing and then all of a sudden shift to a completely different tonal conversation, I think is for many of us. I think for Noriko and Kyoko in the film is one, and I think Shukichi perhaps, but for also us, I think is very off-putting. But there's also a suggestion I think that David Esser makes in the commentary, which might suggest that this is maybe another way of looking at it. It's just her way. It's just her style. It's just who she is. And so, naturally speaking, yes, I think she's selfish, and I think it's just there's this way in which her mind works, and that could be a byproduct of the fact that she is she has, we assume is she has her salon, and so she has to think about things sort of practically. Perhaps that might be the suggestion, and so she's able to turn on and off. But it's so quick that it's very hard to keep up. And I think, in fact, Noriko, when she's asked about the morning clothes, she's, I didn't write, or I don't even think about it, or something. And so that maybe it's too quick for people to keep up. And I think that's one of the many reasons why Shige is seen to be the way she is by a number of people, myself included. But that's another example of her not necessarily being wholly villainous, but she is just as nuanced, just as I was trying to suggest. I think Shukichi is nuanced as well, and therefore she, rather than being a villain, instead becomes a human, which makes the film so much more powerful, right? Because, I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I mean, I've met people who are not dissimilar to Shige. I've met people in my life who aren't dissimilar to Shige, and I know they don't mean to be that way, but it's just, sometimes you talk to people and like, that sort of feeling you get, right? The fingers curl, So that's exactly how I feel, but then I'm reminded, right, this is such a perfect, emblematic depiction of something that is so true to real life, which thus makes me love the film all the more. So that's due to the way in which Shige is depicted, and the performance by the actor Haruko Sugimura there as Shige. I think it's just she's one of the greatest actors in Japanese history. So anyone who doesn't know that the actor's name Haruko Sugimura, that's the actress's name who plays Shige. She appears in many films. In very famous Japanese films, but just remember her name. People remember Toshiro Mifune's name. People remember Chishiro Yu's name, but and also Setsuko Hara's name, of course. But Haruko Sugimura, please remember her name, Haruko Sugimura. Just a wonderful actress. I mean, her work alone, just in Ozu films, the range in which she's able to find in the various roles that she plays, and she plays so many different roles in Ozu films. It's striking. So, yeah. So there's that. So, oh gosh, yes. So what was I? So excuse me here while I just. Hold on. Let's see. Cooper Clover 1972 says, I like Noriko, Setsuko Hara, thinking of others first before herself. Yes. I haven't spoken a lot about Noriko, but that is also very, very important. Noriko is seen as the real almost lifeline, if you will. She shows off a real sense of selflessness rather than selfishness, and I think that's considered to be really, really lovely. And there's no question that it's genuine, right? It's quite genuine, and this is shown in several moments. There's a moment around the middle of the film when it's just her and the mother, and then there's a moment at the end of the film when it's her and the father, and so it expresses moments of quite moving closeness and intimacy, and it's therefore, it suggested also that perhaps part of the reason why she is doing this, perhaps, is the fact that she has a certain sense of duty towards her dead husband, and so perhaps her way of expressing this duty towards dead husband would be to express a kind of piety or devotion towards her late husband's parents, and this is, I think, also an expression, of this, right? One must respect one's parents and one's elders, and these are sort of Confucian ideas or ideals that are embedded in society. Even now, to a certain degree, I would argue that they're embedded in modern Japanese society. But I think also, but at the same time, there is a little bit of an interesting extreme that's taken with Noriko's position, right? Because she is not. I mean, some time has passed, right, since her husband's passing, and so. And the idea is that we don't see her necessarily with other like men, or she hasn't remarried, and so and she does express a certain sense of loneliness, right? There's a very famous speech around the end when she does express this idea that she does feel lonely, and so. Right, it's a very interesting dynamic. I mean, there's really nothing necessarily that is a rule, at least as far as I understand it. That right, and anyone who has become a widow needs to become eternally devoted to the parents of the deceased husband, right? There's no rule like that. But so I think another way to look at that, it's part of her character, and it's just who she is. And in fact, like, the fact that she expresses loneliness is also perhaps indicative of the fact that maybe the visit by the parents to Tokyo is also something that not only she feels a certain sense of devotion, but perhaps it's something that she really welcomes as well. It's something maybe that she needs. Perhaps it's something that's reciprocal in terms of their needs. And if that's the case, and I really think that the fact that she does express this loneliness makes room for this kind of interpretation. And therefore, that makes Noriko as a character much more of a generous one, but also one that is perhaps having certain emotional needs as well. And so therefore, and it's not all fully explained, right? Because we never get any direct details, for instance, about Noriko's family situation, what her situation is there. We never get any specific details about the marriage, how it was. We never get any other information other than the situation that we find her in, and the way she carries herself over the course of the film. So, but again, just like with Shikichi and Shige and others and Tomi, we get these elements or these aspects where we can therefore hopefully make some kind of interpretation that will build the character even further. And so I would suggest to you that perhaps this idea of loneliness, and this idea of maybe perhaps that leading to a sense of wanting a kind of having certain emotional needs, and perhaps the parents in some way fulfilling those needs, albeit maybe temporarily, might create another fuller picture of yet another character that we see here, which is Noriko. There is a sense that sometimes overt acts of gift giving might be seen as being, on the contrary, acts of selfishness, because they might be seen in a way, this is a very Japanese way of thinking of things, but overdoing things in terms of gift giving might be seen as being itself a selfish act, because it draws attention to the fact that you're giving a great gift, So, oh, look at me and all the great things I'm doing. But and so on the one hand, it might be possible to see Noriko being in that situation, when she gives a little bit of money to Tomi and so. But actually, if anyone has that interpretation, I would very gently counter, because it's done in a way that is very clandestine, and also, if I recall correctly, it's done just between the two of them. Shukichi is not present, and yes, so therefore, even her sort of, and also we can assume that it's probably not a great deal of money, and it's just a little bit, right? So, it does also show that there is a certain, well, actually, let me just step back a little bit. In Japan, at least even now, there is a certain idea of giving a little bit of a gift or a little trinket or something to show appreciation is actually very important. When I go to a business trip or something and come back from a business trip, then it's usually very, it's not obligatory. I'm not obliged to do this, but sometimes it's nice to come back and maybe I'll buy little candies or something from the place I was at and give them to people in the office. So those sorts of gifts, when we go to trips, we come back and we have a little bit of gifts or something. And here I think it's the parents are visiting, and so there's a little bit of there's a little bit of a role reversal there, I would argue. But my point here is that this idea of giving a little, not giving too much, because giving too much would then lead to, what does this have certain significance? I don't know. But just giving just the right amount of something is very important. And I think Noriko does that just right. And she doesn't call attention to herself. And I think it becomes, when we think about it more, it becomes all the more powerful by virtue of the fact that we realize that she is not in the most extravagant of an economic situation herself. And so I think it's really a lovely moment. But yeah, so the more I think about it, the more, in my mind anyway, Noriko as a character is, even though she seems to be expressing her own flaws in terms of she calls herself selfish, she calls herself lonely, I think that then rounds out her character all the more and makes her, again, a character with more depth and more humanity. Again, another powerful aspect of this film. Let's see. So sorry about this. Paula says Shige was very selfish and unlikable. Yes, the cookie scene was so perfect. Wonderful acting from Haruko Sugimura throughout. Yes. Were they cookies or were they cakes? I don't know. I think maybe they might have been oversized cookies as well. If I said cakes and they were cookies, I apologize. But Newberry says is it possible if you can open up the dual format package later? I would like to see the ins. I've been asked a lot about the dual format package. Okay, so I'll just get this out of the way. So this is the dual format, and it comes in this sort of package like this, and that's the back, and it slides out like this, okay, and then there's the interior packaging here, and then there's that, and then we open it up. I hope the discs are in here. Yep, there are the discs, right there. There are the two discs there inside, the DVD and the Blu-ray, and I'm sorry, the DVD's here, and then the Blu-ray is on the other side. So it's 2 discs DVD and 1 disc Blu-ray, and with the booklet. And then if you can see there, the Blu-ray has that 1 disc, so that's okay. But the 2 disc setup is a little bit funny, as some of you may know, because they're one on top of each other, but they have to have a little bit of space so they don't touch. So you just, if you want to get at the lower disc, you have to, you can do a number of things. So I take the first disc off first, and then if you take the first disc off, you can see that there's another layer, which there's a slight overlap with the upper part of the plastic, and so you have to be a little bit careful. You have to take it out at a little bit of an angle, so not to create as little resistance as possible. But there you go, and it can be removed from the housing unit as such, and then you can return it, and there we go. The problem with these, of course, is that they are plastic. Like with all digipacks, there are no means of replacing these actual plastic units inside. And so if these become broken or cracked or damaged, I've never been able to replace this actual plastic interior unit. And so one has to be very careful, don't sit on it or anything like that. And believe me, I've had issues with broken interior plastic casing, and so it's been a little bit, these things aren't the sturdiest things in the world. But there you go, that's the dual format, edition inside. So, and that differs from the Blu-ray only packaging here, which is single disc. And it just opens up like so. So there we go. I hope that is... So I've been asked about this a lot. I think because the dual format, the releasing, the dual formats have been phased out, or they're slowly being phased out by Criterion. And I think this particular dual format release of Tokyo Story is no longer available in lieu of the currently available Blu-ray only release. So I hope that helps. So hopefully one day I'll do more dual format videos. But let's see. Jared says, Noriko is a character that has stuck with me since I saw this film. She is such a great character. Yes. Wolfgratz. Noriko is sometimes in danger of becoming a Mary Sue, but I can't help loving her. Perhaps yes, but I would very gently counter that with the idea that we do see her and her own admitted frailties and weaknesses. We also see her, and she does work. And so I don't think things necessarily come easy to her. And also, she did lose her husband. So at this time, therefore, she has to make a living for herself. And so I don't, considering also the time, I wouldn't necessarily consider it to be. I mean, we are in the 50s, so I think we're well on our way of seeing economic progress in Japan. So it's not a it's not a full situation of dire straits situation as it might have been more closer to the immediate post-war period. But nonetheless, I think it's very. I think there are certain elements that are expressed in the film that might suggest a certain level of hardship on her part, which is what I was suggesting or trying to suggest earlier. But I understand what you're saying, though. Let's see. Paula says, agree on the Mary Sue comment, Wolfgrat. It's impossible not to like her, but I know what you mean. Yes, yes. Paula makes a similar point, but I think, yes. And then actually Wolfgrat says, I love the way she underplays her reaction to discussion of her deceased husband. Yes, actually, and I think you addressed the counter, which I have expressed, and I think maybe we are already on the same page with this, so, and Paula as well. So I would therefore I would suggest it's not necessarily that everything, right, because it's not like everything comes easy to her. That I think that's the point that I want to make. It's just that that's the way that she is trying to express herself. And remember, I think we rarely see her. I mean, we see her, I think, 99% of the time when we see her in the film. We see her when she's with the parents, right? I mean, there are a couple moments when we see her and she's not with the parents, and this is when she is in the office, and so there might be a certain level of maybe she might act differently when she's with the parents versus when she's not with the parents. So there might be something to that as well. But although I would maybe even counter what I'm trying to say just now, because if we were to compare the scene when she hears about the news of Tomi on the phone when she's at the office, and the look on her face when she sits down at her desk, and then we see the look on her face when she is at the bedside of Tomi, just prior to Tomi's passing. The looks on the look on her face on one scene is almost the same as the look on her face on the other scene, and so. And granted, it's maybe an extraordinary situation because it's the fact that the family member is dying. So it's maybe not. It might be not an ordinary circumstance. But still, my point is that on the one hand, maybe she's acting differently when she is with the parents. But on the other hand, the way that she expresses herself in this moment when she's not with the parents is almost identical to the way that she's expressing herself when she's with the family. And so perhaps there is no divide between the inner Noriko and the outer Noriko, if you know what I mean. But I think there's perhaps more room for interpretation and discussion there than I'm giving credit. So I'm not doing justice to that discussion, but I think Wolfgratz and Paula, and you're doing a much better job of this than I am. So thank you very much. And Cine Arts as well. When you say, I find Noriko to be one of the greatest characters in cinema. And Jared also adds in, yeah, great, she's such a caring character, but I do get the Mary Sue connection. Oh, this is interesting. She sort of can't do wrong in the eyes of those around her. What she does, actually, right? I mean, Shige kind of talks down to her, kind of, right? When he says, you didn't bring your mourning clothes or something like that. So, I mean, I guess she can't, I suppose maybe the point is that you're really supposed to like her, but I don't necessarily, when I hear the phrase Mary Sue, that description, I mean, it became, I think, very widely prevalent in our film fan circles, I think, right, in discussions, I think, of criticisms maybe directed towards Star Wars, I think, but and so I'm thinking about it in those terms, you know. Maybe my definition of what that term means is slightly different, but my sense is that like, I don't necessarily see things as coming easy to her. And also, I don't necessarily see her as being, for lack of a better phrase, I know this isn't what you mean, and I don't mean to sound disparaging, and if I do, I apologize. But I don't necessarily see her as trying to be like a goody two shoes. I see her as being, because she does express self doubt, and she also does express a sense of self criticism, which I think is heartfelt. I really do, and that I believe I can feel that way by the strength of Setsuko Hara's performance. But this is very interesting, very, very interesting. And in fact, yes, Gary Robinson says she's not perfect. She has her flaws, and she said in all three films. So yes, yes, and then let's see. Here we go. But this is a very interesting discussion between or among you. Very interesting. Never quite thought of it that way. This is giving me very good food for thought. Thank you very much. Anyway, let me just go here. Sorry, I've just jumped down again, so I'm just trying to find my place here. I tend to do this. Okay. All right. Sorry about this. I do. Okay. All right, now I'm back. Okay. Oh yes, and then there's a discussion of Shige here, and Wolfgratz says Shige is so impressive in the way she effortlessly rewrites the story of the visit. Yes, yes, the fun they had, the lovely talks with their children, how happy they were. It made me really vexed. Yes, and there is a question as to whether that might have been a psychological ploy in order to basically fool herself into thinking that they had a good time and to try to evade any sense of guilt. I'm not sure if Shige feels that way. I mean, I would say that maybe she really feels that they had a good time. And she even gets a little bit upset with Shukichi, right? Because remember, after the fact, Shukichi says, "Oh, I remember a time when, right, at Atami, right, as pictured here." He says, "Oh, maybe there's a little bout. She felt there, she had a little spell, and then right, Shige says, "Why didn't you tell us? You never told us." So she even has the gall to get frustrated at that moment towards Shukichi. But but even that moment I can see as, I mean, I don't necessarily see her as being totally unsympathetic. Let me put it that way. I mean, I can see that moment as trying to express a certain sense of they really had fun. They really had a good time, or being worried about her mother's health, right? Because she does express these feelings of sadness, right? And I'm not suggesting, Wolfgratz, that you're suggesting that she's an evil character. I mean, you say it made me really vexed, and so I think you and I are on the same page here as well. I think she is very sincere in how she feels. It's just the way she's expressing it. Just has a way of doing that. Has a way of curling the fingers, and so yeah. And Paula too says that scene wanting her mother's clothes was awful. Her behavior was so shocking. She was almost too believable too. Yes, great acting. Yes, I completely agree with you, Paula. Yes. And curious about the use of fans in Japanese culture. I noticed at points they seem to be using the fans in specific ways, tapping their shoulders. Yes, I think that this part here, I think that has to do. I mean, I don't do that, and I don't see people doing that here anymore. So it's not, and people use fans. For instance, I have a little fan that I use when I'm on the train because in the summer months it's quite hot. Not all the time, but sometimes it's quite hot, and so I have to fan myself in order to temporarily cool down. And the fans, I think, are used to cool off. And I think there's that little thing there, but no one does that anymore. But it's also, please also note that the fans are very important. Note how people use the fans. They fan themselves, This is true when, for example, this is actually this is noticeable. This is one of the most beautiful cuts in the film. Remember the scene where Shukichi and Tomi are having dinner with Noriko, and Noriko's back is to the camera, and we see them at the table, and the two of them eating. Noriko is not eating. This is very important. She's sitting there, and her back is to the camera, and she's fanning them. She's fanning the table as they're eating. It's sort of her way of giving, they are her guests in a way, and so she's fanning them. It's the same is true. Remember when Shukichi later visits the old acquaintance Hattori in his house, and we see the wife, we assume is the wife in the background there. She's still present, but she's also fanning Shukichi. So that's a sign of maybe welcoming one's guests, perhaps. But go back to the moment of the dinner, Noriko welcoming the two of them for the meal, and she's fanning them. It cuts then, right, if my memory is not incorrect, it cuts then to a shot of the son and the daughter, Koichi and Shige. And the fact that they are fanning themselves, and they are planning that's where they're planning their trip, right, to have they can give a little money to send the two of them off to Atami, and so they're fanning themselves. And I thought that was such a beautiful juxtaposition, right? On the one hand, Noriko is selfless and she's not fanning herself, but she's fanning them, whereas Koichi and Shige are then cut immediately to them, and we see them not fanning anyone else but themselves, and not even themselves, but Shige is fanning herself and Koichi is fanning herself. So I thought that was such a great moment. So, yeah. So, let's see. Yes, and then Wolfgat says here, on the other hand, let's see, she isn't hurrying off to catch a ball game. Kyoko's grief and self-blame doesn't last long, does it? Kyoko, you're talking about the youngest daughter as well. Yes, but I think this is also very natural. I mean, we don't know also how much time, right? How much time passes between when all of them are assembled after Tomi's death to where it's just Noriko at the house at the end. I'm not sure how much time has passed, but maybe a number of days have passed, and so the amount of, I think, depending on the amount of time that has passed, might affect my answer or my response to the comment that you made, Wolfgratz, about Kyoko. But I think you have a point there as well. Yes. Let's see. Just keep going here. Yes, there is a great discussion about Shige. Yes, JMNXYZ2 says yes. Shige's most shocking moment to me is when she basically denies her parents and says that they are old friends. And said, yes, remember when they come into the salon, and that's where Shige is working on the customers there or something, and the customer says, who are they? And rather than acknowledging them as her parents, Shige says, oh, they are just some old friends. So that is a really that's another finger curling moment, right? If ever there was one. Yes, it's that was quite a moment, But even that, though, can, I think, be explained. It's not it's not a wholly unreasonable thing to do, right? Because if I might be incorrect in my recollection, but as I recall that scene, Shige is talking to one of her customers, right? And so it's like sometimes you have people when they're in their work, sometimes people like to talk about their family, but then sometimes you have people who don't like to talk about their family. And so as frustrating as I do feel, and I feel very frustrated with that moment, I do also think that there is room to perhaps explain Shie's reaction or her actions there by suggesting maybe she doesn't, it's just a moment where she doesn't want to get into the details of her own family while she's, in the middle of working with a client at the time. I don't know, it could be like that. But at the same time, that could be countered by the fact that her salon is actually in her house. And so I think people who come to the salon perhaps might have a sense of that. And she isn't necessarily completely devoted to her work as we see, because the phone is there and she uses the phone to do, earlier in the film, we see her using the phone, which is in the salon, like, room itself, to call Noriko and actually talk about a family matter, a private matter. And so that perhaps is immediately countering what I've just said. But so maybe Shige is ultimately, her actions are indefensible. I don't know, perhaps. I don't know. But again, just throwing it out there just for consideration. You can accept or reject at your pleasure. MG Nava, hello. It's nice to see you. Julio Liu, hello. Yes. Paula, then, yes. That scene where she denies her parents, so horrible. Most shocking of her scenes. I agree. Yes. Let's see. Great discussion here. Let's see. Julio Liu says, Tokyo Story was my first Ozu film too, because I got baited by people saying it was the greatest film of all time. Yes. Carl's Ransom Review says, Tokyo Story was my second Ozu film. And Wolfrat says he does have a stock company, meaning this is the discussion about the many appearances of actors in various films by Ozu. Max says, I'm interested in today's relationship between younger and older generations in Japan, comparing to the present to the one presented in the movie. Yes, I mean, I tried to allude to this as well, but just to go back briefly, I don't know. I would say, again, I'm not a sociologist, and but my sense, based on my own experience, is that I think Noriko's reaction or Noriko's devotion is a little bit extreme, in the sense that I don't necessarily see the need for her to feel so devoted to the parents of her late husband so long, all this time after the fact of his passing. So on the one hand, I see that as a little bit extreme, but on the other hand, I think that can be explained by the very nature of how she feels about not only her parents-in-law, but also perhaps some kind of an emotional need that she has, which I think speaks not to a broader discussion of younger generations versus older generations, but it speaks specifically to the nature of her character. So it takes the discussion a little bit outside of the context of your question, so I apologize. But there's that. There are instances also of grown-up children still living with their parents, and it's not seen as a necessarily stigma. And so we see the youngest daughter living with their parents still, Kyoko. So I don't see that as being a stigma. Although, and also there's this discussion also, right, which I didn't even talk about, I didn't touch on at all. Kyoko is single. And there's a discussion, which is inaugurated, I think, by Shige, which is, right, after Tomi's, the suggestion being that after the wife, Tomi, dies, Shukichi will be alone, and for the time being, he is living with Kyoko, so he has someone there to live with. But the idea is that, or the expectation, the social expectation, is that Kyoko will probably marry soon, and the expectation is that if she marries, then she will leave the house. There is no notion of then the husband and wife coming together and living with Shukichi. No, the assumption is that she will leave the house upon her marriage, leaving the elderly Shukichi home by himself. And so there is that undercurrent of a further layer of potential tragedy there, because the loss of Tomi actually means so much more in that context. So this is, I think, something that's touched upon. And so that notion of marrying and leaving, what's the phrase, leaving the nest, right? And just leaving Shukichi behind. I mean, that is, I would say, it's still it's not uncommon now, but I think the whole notion of having to leave is perhaps, it can be seen, at least from some circles, not everyone perhaps, but some pockets of Japanese society today, as being maybe somewhat antiquated. I'm not sure, but it's something that I don't think is wholly foreign to modern day audiences in Japan who decide to watch this film. Let me put it that way. Let's see. Okay, just going over the comments here because we're approaching the 8 o'clock time, and yes. All right. Just skipping over some comments here. I'm really I don't mean to skip over things, but I see the conversation that's being had here. It's really great, really great. Let's see. A Touch of Film is here. Our dear friend, Touch of Film. Hello, hello. A Touch of Film. He is, a touch of film. If you, anyone who knows this, who is watching my YouTube channel, will already know A Touch of Film anyway. But if you don't, A Touch of Film, you should watch his YouTube channel, you should watch his videos, and you should subscribe to his YouTube channel, because A Touch of Film, if you like Tokyo Story and you like Asian cinema, you will enjoy A Touch of Film's channel. Great, great channel. It's one of my go-tos. I learned so much. I have so many. I have so many like gaps in my knowledge. So many gaps in my knowledge when it comes to like Japanese cinema, South Korean cinema, Hong Kong cinema, etc., and etc., and just A Touch of Film. Just, he knows everything, absolutely everything, and I think he has every single film. I don't know, maybe I'm exaggerating, I don't know, but he just his collection is extraordinary. So A Touch of Film, you have to subscribe. Please, please, please subscribe to Touch of Film and comment and watch his videos. Just one of the great, great experts. He is my sensei, A Touch of Film sensei. Let's see. Again, right. And Touch of Film says, I've done a video on Tokyo Story. Great, great. So watch the video by A Touch of Film on Tokyo Story, please. That would be wonderful. As Paula says, I loved Ozu's use of the camera. I know it's a much discussed topic. Yes, I haven't spoken about it here as well, but the camera work is it's actually quite extraordinary. What's it? The director of photography, Yuharu Atsuta, and so it's punctuated by primarily static shots, usually low angles, or taken from a low vantage point. But then there are moments of occasional tracking shots, movement of camera. And I think there's a movement of camera, for instance, around the Ueno Park sequence, although I could be mistaken. But there's a certain, how shall I put it? I think apart from the technical craft of it, which is highly, it's just so skilled, and so it put together with such loving care. But there is also a sense of, how should I put it? It's almost like there is no flashy camera movement, and in fact, that therefore goes towards the idea, at least in my mind, of a visual manifestation of the concept of mono no aware, this idea of the beauty in the passing of all things and the pathos of life, and life goes on. That sort of concept that I think Wolfgratz was referring to. And this, right, because there's something. There's a serenity about it, which then lends itself to a notion, at least in my heart, of the passing of simple moments, from moment to moment to moment, that are quiet and that are serene and that are composed, and that never betray a sense of chaos, but rather suggest a sense of peace, almost, despite the deepest of tragedies that might occur. So I find that to be quite poetically fitting. And especially, it's true of most of Ozu's later works, but it's especially true, I think, of this film. Just keep going here. Let's see. Yes, Kubrick Lover 1972, Daisuke, maybe Ozu likes to see what comes before and after events, which might matter more than the actual event itself. Yes, this is my discussion of the elliptical nature of Ozu's narrative in Tokyo Story. And this is true also of Ozu's other works as well, which I don't want to get into. But yes, sometimes the key events, what we think to be the key events in an Ozu film, are in fact never shown. But what are shown are the setup to an event, and then the reaction to the event, or the aftermath after the event, or the response to an event. But we never see the event itself, and these can be really, really key events. Like we never see Tomi die. We see her dying, but we never see her die, and we never see her collapse. We never. And those, I think, and we never see the reunion. We never see the reunion between the parents and children at the first time when they meet after what must be a long time. So we never see those key moments, which we would otherwise think to be key moments in this kind of family drama. And the same is true for Ozu's other works. Again, I don't want to get into too many details, but there are so many other instances where you have key moments that are never shown on screen. And so perhaps it's this idea of showing, it's like, I don't know how to put it, but it's almost like, right, it's almost more important, I don't think is the right way for me to express it, but it's almost like, for the sake of cinema, it's almost more, it's sort of true to form, rather, to just see the effects and the preparations, the before and after, rather than the it itself. And I think that's, it's like, how should I put it? Because like it's the it. I don't know how do I put it, but for me, it seems almost fitting, because it's like the it moment, when it happens like that, and so there's very little time to process, and I think the more, and it becomes, it's like almost an extraordinary event, or an unnatural or extraordinary event. So we put it that way. There are things that don't happen all the time. So when they happen at that moment, maybe people are at their most unnatural, as it were, or maybe they're most surprised or most perplexed. They don't know quite what to do. So perhaps in one way, it's a way in which we can see the true character of someone how they react upon first experiencing the it, whatever the it may be. But then another way of looking at it, which is what I think Kubrick Lover 1972 it might be referring to, is that there's also something to be said about how humans respond after time passes, or how humans react, or how they prepare for things, or how they are before and after the it happens. And I think that exploration is also something that is a window into the souls of a character, of a person. And so that could be maybe what you're referring to, Kubrick Lover, I'm not sure. But in any event, I completely agree with you. Gosh, just skipping over a bunch of comments here. Really, really great discussion that's being had here. It's 8 o'clock, so I'm just starting to want to wind down here. But Let's see. Yeah, there's great comments here. Um, yes, yes. Oh gosh, what a great discussion here. Um, yes. So I'm just going over the discussion here. It's going in a lot of places. I see, or it went in a lot of places. Yes. Okay. Ole Christensen, hello, hello. It's nice to see you. Nice to see you. I hope you're well. Let's see. All right. Okay. Wow. Okay. Um, Dan White is here. Hello. Hello. Um, Sahil Preet Singh Thin. Hello. How are you? You say, I've only just watched my first Ozu film, which is An Autumn Afternoon, which was just sublime. I can't wait to explore the rest of his filmography. Yes, I hope you enjoy your Ozu journey, my friend. Let's see. Gary Robinson says, I dislike Shige, but I love the actress. She's awesome. Yes. Yes. Haruko Sugimura. Yes. Thank you, Wolfgratz, as well. Yes. Great discussion here. Okay. Yes. And Elliot Cole. Oh, Elliot, our dear friend Elliot. It's great to see you, my friend. I hope you are well. You are the best. One of my favorite people ever. Elliot Cohen, my dear friend. Let's see. Okay. Wow, this is great. This conversation is great. You guys are fantastic. Wonderful job. Oh, and I've just reached the point where Wolfgratz and Paul are, I think, referring to the comment that I made about were they cookies or cakes. And, okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, there are, I mean, you could have oversized cookies, I suppose, with a lot of cream in them. I mean, I have seen them. I mean, what are those cookies called? Are those cookies or those? Oh, well, anyway, okay, we'll call them cakes. Okay, so okay, or oversized cookies. I don't know. Let's see. Wow, chips or crisps. Wow, that's a great. You know, I remember when I first was living in, when I was very young, and my family moved when I was 6 or 7, I think. We moved to the United Kingdom. It was my first time in the United Kingdom. And I remember before that I was in the United States. And I remember that I was so taken by the fact that in the United Kingdom, potato chips are called crisps. I was so taken by that, and I was at 6 or 7. I was, wow, crisps. Wow, that's such a cool word. That's perfect, right? Because that's what they are. They are crispy. I thought that was great. But anyway, okay. Let's see. Okay, here. Okay. Oh, Cine Art says, Daisuke, what is your favorite score from an Ozu film? Mine are from Tokyo Story in early summer. I find that Tokyo Story has the most epic score of his films. Yes, the music is what, Takanobu Saito, right? And so, do I have that right, Takanobu Saito? Yes, Takanobu Saito. And so, I like this music. The I think also the music, it comes in at times, and I think David Esser makes a point of this. There's a, and I find this really quite lovely and charming. There is a certain use of the music that I would suggest is maybe haunting and a little bit melodramatic in the way it's employed, and so I really love the score here. It has that almost rush of emotion at the very beginning and just goes into a gentle sort of melody. It's just the perfect encapsulation in terms of music of this film, in my opinion. Okay, let's see. Yes, Kubrick Lover 1972 has a great point as well. Noriko honors the Japanese hierarchical system with asking her boss for time off. Yes, this is after she is asked by Shige to take care of the parents, right? And so she's called at the office, and so she is seen to ask the boss for time off. That's an excellent point. And then borrowing stuff from her neighbor, so humble. Yes, yes. And Kubrick Lover 1972 says Noriko lives on very little. Yes, that's definitely the case. Let's see. Wolfgrat says, "Oh, Daisuke, you are so forgiving and understanding man. I feel you are the Noriko to my Kyoko." Wow, that's very nice of you. Thank you very much. Although I wouldn't necessarily put myself on the same level as Noriko ever. I think she is on a completely different plane. I would I would actually, I mean this, I would actually say I'm probably closer to, I really hate to say this, but I'm probably closer to one of the children. I don't want to say who, but I really should improve that. But let's see. And then Wolfgat says, yeah, Kyoko will be married off, and apparently her dad can't live with her new family. That seems out of the question in these. So yes, and I tried to allude to that. It seems like a little bit off, but off is the wrong word, but maybe it seems a little bit antiquated when looking at it now through the lens of modern times, of course, but. I mean, that I think is something that we have to consider back in the day, of course. Okay, let's see here. Okay, let's see. Okay, we're just going off here. Okay, let's see. Okay, and then now I have reached the end of the chat. So I'm now at the chat, and now we're talking about cakes and crisps and Tarantino and the Coen brothers. Okay, so great, well done. So let's see. It's now 10 past 8 in the morning here in Japan. So let me start to wind down because I do have, unfortunately, I have things to have to prepare later today. So I can't speak for very much longer on this film. I'd love to, but I really can't speak very much longer. So let me just start to wind down here. Gosh, there could be. I usually try to avoid those discussions on my YouTube channel about the greatest films ever made. Not not favorite films, but the greatest films ever made. What are considered among the general critical consensus as being the greatest films ever made. I try to avoid those discussions, and the reason why is because I, I, I don't know. I tend. I find those discussions very difficult to make for me, to be perfectly honest, because it's like like there's if I say something that I immediately think, oh gosh, I've skipped over 100 other, at least 100, 1,000 other potential candidates. Like if I say this is the greatest film, well, what about this film? What about that film? What about that film? So I tend to avoid those discussions because it's very difficult for me to keep up, to be perfectly honest, and I tend to be a little bit ill-equipped when it comes to those discussions. So, but with that being said, my friends, if someone were to say to me, Tokyo Story is one of the greatest films of all time, I would certainly not disagree, and I would certainly even go one step further and say that it could be one of, if not the greatest film. And I think the fact that it is so timeless is really remarkable. And I think the fact that it's aging so well, I think, is incredibly remarkable. And I think, oh, that's okay. That's okay. You can come in. I'm about to finish. So, all right, I'm going to start winding, joining us. So if you don't mind, go on. You okay? All right. All right. So you want to say hello?
Hello.
Hello? What's your name? Ow. Oh, you okay? You okay? You hit your head? You okay? Oh. All right. So I think this is a good time for me to end. But right? You wanna have breakfast? We have to go. We have to go take Karen to swimming, right? Right? Do you want to come with me, or you want to stay here? You want to? Okay. All right. We'll do that. Okay. All right. Here. Let's sit up. You want to sit on my lap? That. All right. Oh, I can't see your face. Sorry about this. So, my son is here, so I think this is a good time for me to end. But what I was going to say is I wouldn't disagree with anyone who would make the suggestion or assertion to me that this is the greatest film ever made. Of course, there's always room for debate in that field, and I understand that. But the point that I'm making, that I think this is one of the most extraordinary works of art I have ever had the privilege and pleasure of coming across. And I feel so fortunate to be alive and to have been able to experience this. Aren't we lucky? Aren't we lucky that we live in a time where we are able to experience a film from many years ago and still be able to talk about it and to experience it and to discuss it and even to disagree. I mean, it's great. I mean, we there was even a little bit of I wouldn't call it a debate, but there was a really healthy disagreement or a discussion about, for instance, is Noriko a Mary Sue? And wow, that really blew my mind, and it makes the film for me much more. It creates more just it expands the horizon, more vistas of exploration that have yet to be traversed. And so this is just more food for thought for me. So the fact that this can be had even now, many years after the film was initially released, is just amazing to me. And I think that's a testament to the fact that this film is, right? It's a really great film. You think so? You think so? Yeah? Yeah? So anyway, my friends, with that, let me end. And because we have to also take the dog for a walk too, right? You want to come with me for a walk? Yeah? All right. Well, thank you so much. All right. So let me just wind down and just say thank you very much. So thank you very much for joining. And let me just say here, okay. All right. So I see. Thank you very much for your time. So Jared, thank you. Sexy Monkey, that's okay. It's nice to see you. I hope you're well. And whoops. Okay. Sorry about that. You okay? Okay. You want to see it? You want to see it? There you go. There you go. And let's see. So, all right, my friends. Yes, so thank you very much, my friends. And as I say, the live stream is going to end here, but that doesn't mean that your discussions need to end as well. So please feel free to keep continuing your discussions. They are great. I was just looking at the chat as I was scrolling down, and I see you went in all sorts of directions, much more in depth than I could ever go. So you guys are just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. It's just wonderful to see, and I'm just always ever impressed and humbled by your depth of knowledge and your powers of perception and the things that you do to show me your own insights, which is just fantastic. So thank you very much for teaching me many more things about this deep and enriching and lovely film. So please note that the film Club live stream poll is still up. Right now it's September. Wow, it's September 1st already. So it's September 1st, and so it'll be open until September 10th. I think it's very, very close right now, and so sorry about that. So I think it's at the point where I think one vote will make the difference, and so if you haven't made your vote yet on the poll, if you haven't cast your ballot, so to speak, I encourage you to check out the community tab of my YouTube page and please vote for one of those 5 films that you want to discuss. And that discussion will be had at on the last Sunday of September. So it's going to be a bit of there's going to be a little bit of a break. Who knows? If I decide to do another live stream, I'll let you know as soon as possible. But to be perfectly honest, my schedule is a little bit tough at the moment, and so, oops, you okay? My schedule is a little bit tough at the moment, so I don't know if I'll be able to schedule anything quite soon. But if I am able to in the meantime, I will do so. You want to go? You want to go get some milk? You want to go get some milk? Okay. Paula says, what I think I see Faces is back in. Oh, really? Faces is in the lead? Wow. Last time I checked, it was Detour. But now Faces is in the lead. That's amazing. So it's like, last time I checked, it was Faces. It was actually Faces, Detour, and Pickpocket. Pickpocket was up there for a bit. And then I think prior to that, My Darling Clementine was making a little bit of a run there as well. But now it was first Faces and then Detour, and then Detour. Now it's back to Faces. Wow, amazing. Don't forget the Thin Blue Line, though. Okay, the Thin Blue Line is fantastic. So, but perhaps because it's the documentary, it's the lone documentary, that probably has something to do with it. Perhaps, I'm not sure, but perhaps this might mean that there might be a surge in the Thin Blue Line votes between now and the 10th. So we'll see. That would be great. That would be absolutely fantastic. But even if it's not the Thin Blue Line, one of those other 4 would just be fantastic, right? What do you think, buddy? Yeah? Yeah? All right. Sorry about this. All right, let's go. I know you're a little bit, you want to talk about other things instead of this, right? Yeah, sorry about that. All right, let's go. So, so vote in the poll, and I will see you at the next video. And if there are any other announcements to be made about any impromptu live streams, if I want to do one more live stream in between, I will let you know as soon as possible. So, but in the meantime, my friends, please be well and have a great rest of your day. And I will see you again very soon. Please watch a lot of great movies, and thank you so much for your support and encouragement. It means so much to me. And talk to you again very soon. Bye. Yeah, we're done. Yeah, sorry. Thank you, buddy. Thank you. You want to go? Here. So, do you want to go? Do you want to go with me to the pool? All right, we have to take Karen to the pool. Is that okay? Okay. All right. Oh, let me see. Let me see. Yeah. All right. Oh, good job, buddy. Good job, buddy. Mwah. All right. So we got to turn off the. Do you want to help me turn off the video? You want to help me turn that off? Do you know how to turn it off? Okay, here I'll show you. So you got to push. Can you push that little X there? Can you push that little X? Because they're still watching. So see, it's kind of like a hot mic. You know. Okay, so can you push that button? Here we go. Ready? Awesome.